Our guests are the legendary chess master, Garry Kasparov, and the widely acclaimed Washington Post journalist, Robert Kaiser. The focus of their discussion is Mr. Kasparov's book, Winter is Coming: Why Vladimir Putin and the Enemies of the Free World Must Be Stopped. Together, they will be discussing the views put forth in this very provocative new book.
Your book is full of passion, not least because, and very rewarding, I should say, to read, I felt, not least because it compels its reader to grapple with some very serious and very big questions. You don't let the reader off the hook. Your devastating portrait of Vladimir Putin is an important contribution, I think. But first, since we're sitting in the Carnegie Council on Ethics in International Affairs, I thought we might start by discussing your powerful call in this book for a moral foreign policy, particularly from the United States and its Western allies. A moral policy is necessary, you write, if we are to prevail against authoritarian and terrorist rivals and enemies. Maybe we should start with definitions. What is a moral foreign policy?
I've been trying, as a former professional chess player, to look back to analyze the moves that were made in the game that the free world has won, Cold War. And I believe it was not just because of economic or military factors, but most of all because of the moral values, because of the core values of the free world that were compelling for people who lived, like me, born and raised on the other side of the Iron Curtain. I was trying to demonstrate in the book that while from the end of the World War II to the end of the Cold War, from Harry Truman to Ronald Reagan, the United States foreign policy was fairly consistent. There were some fluctuations, but within the range, because both Democrats and Republicans, presidents from both parties, they just recognized that it was an existential threat from communism, and working with the institutions built by Truman administration in the 40s, they followed this path. What's happened in 91, 92, instead of being consistent, U.S. foreign policy worked more like a pendulum, slinging from one side to another. So Clinton did little, Bush 43 did too much, Obama has been doing nothing. And it created a very dangerous vacuum in the world because whether American allies and friends or foes, they were quite puzzled, of course, for different reasons. Because expecting U.S. foreign policy to make a U-turn with a new president, with a new master of the Oval Office, it's quite challenging. And I think that it's time to come up with another, you may call it a doctrine, if we go back to the mid-40s, to build this doctrine with a vision of the future, with a strategy. It's not thinking, what do we do now? So, but to understand how actions today could contribute to a better, safer world, prosperous world, peaceful environment 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now.
So define a moral policy. What would it consist of?
No, moral policy, it's if we're talking about moral issues, for instance, I believe that even dealing with allies, long-term allies like Saudi Arabia, United States cannot refrain from harsh criticism of the human rights records. So it's very important that the new world order, if we can use these words, though I understand they could be quite tricky, should be based on the values that are fundamental for the free world. And I believe, by these moral issues, they will resonate well with people who live today in the unfree world, because there's still billions of people who live in the totalitarian or non-democratic countries, and many of them have fundamental mistrust to American foreign policy because they could see, business and short-term interest, not a strategic vision that could benefit everybody.
You've used the term in the book and again this morning, existential threat. It seems to me that one of the differences between the world that I covered when I was the Moscow correspondent of the Washington Post in the early 70s and today is that the nature of the threat is quite different. Give me your view of that.
Yeah, I agree that the existential threat that the United States and the free world faced 70, 60, 50, 40, maybe even 30 years ago, but less so, it's no longer there. Though of course we have a paranoid dictator in Russia. The country now today it's a full-blown one-man dictatorship. That was not the case in the Soviet Union. Naturally, Russia and Putin is a pale shadow, economically and militarily, of what the Soviet Union was. And once speaking at CNBC show on the floor of New York Stock Exchange, I said that from this room, the United States could do more damage to Putin's Russia than all the presidents from Harry Truman to Ronald Reagan could do during the Cold War. So Russia today, of course, is much more vulnerable. But as you said correctly, the nature of the threat has changed. And if 30, 40, 50 years ago, the United States faced the Soviet Union as the sort of, as a leader of the global coalition against the free world, today there is no leader. Of course, Putin is the most powerful enemy of the free world, but there are many other groups that do exist, and they could inflict damage. Not as big as Soviet Union could or Putin can today, but still, it could be extremely painful and tragic. What I try to explain in the book is that while the world is getting smaller thanks to the technologies, it created, communications, and it's also created an illusion that it means progress automatically. While this device is agnostic, it means the good nor bad. It simply, helps us to transfer information. It can help us with business, with finance, with social, cultural exchange, but it also helps terrorists. And they know how to use social networks. And the problem is that, while this world is so small and we can learn whatever is happening in the world within the split of a second, whether it's earthquake in Pakistan or tsunami in Indonesia or elections elsewhere, so in Argentina. The guys on the other side of the fence, they have no choice but to keep going with this open conflict with the free world, because otherwise they cannot justify their political existence. What else, they can offer to those they oppress, they govern? So it's not accidental that Putin's domestic policy is based entirely on the anti-American propaganda. So if you switch to Russian talk shows, you will not find anything about Russia. It's about Ukraine, it's about Georgia, it's about Estonia, it's about Syria, and of course it's about America. And it doesn't matter whether America is trying to be friendly and offering a reset button. At the end of the day, it's all about finding enemies. And the same with Iranian mullahs, the same with other thugs and terrorists. They need big target. They need free world as an enemy, and of course America as a looming target, because without it, they will have to compete with us in innovations, technologies, ideas, and they know that this competition is lost from the beginning to them. And they know they have one competitive advantage over us. It's the value of human life. For us, each loss of human life is tragedy. For them, sacrificing millions, it's just demonstration of their strength.
One of the big differences between the Cold War era and today in this country is the great decline of confidence in America, in the American government, in American institutions, etc. But this is echoed all around Western Europe too. Western European public opinion is not enthusiastic about supporting military establishments or about supporting foreign military adventures, just as is the case in this country. You prescribe in your book a pretty forceful, sometimes even aggressive policy, but how are you going to get public support for that policy?
Today, I think it's very important for people to understand that, even if we believe we're done with the war is not done with us. So it will, certain things will continue. I mean, San Bernardino attack, many believe could be an accident, but it will continue because for ISIS of this world, and I say ISIS because it could be Al-Qaeda, it could be ISIS. At the end of the day, the way these terrorist organizations build is just they're not competing with the free world in economy or even in ideas. It's all about demonstrating their brutality and terror. By the way, Soviet Union, after Stalin's death, became sort of a country with its communist dictatorship, but with collective leadership. And as China today, we could see that any collective leadership is far more stable than one-man dictatorship. Because even if you have 10 bad guys making decisions, they'll always look for a balance. And that's why you could expect Soviet Union to, with this global competition and with many proxy wars, still, trying to be reasonable and to follow sort of the international regulations. And you can hardly expect Soviet leaders, not to respect their own signature, as Putin did several times already. I hope that American public now will start, recognizing that, two giant oceans are no longer offering protection against these threats. And America is the most globalized economy in the world. And if you expect to benefit from global trade, from global exchange, global labor market, social networks, you can't pretend that you are no longer part of of global affairs. And without the United States, maybe that's the greatest lessons of Obama's presidency is, without the United States playing a key role in some of the most explosive regions, what happens is, it's the vacuum being filled by other guys. So if America walks away from Middle East, it doesn't mean there will be lasting peace there. It means we're now facing a potential war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Even to be more precise, it's already a proxy war between these two countries, and we already see the hundreds of thousands of people killed, millions of refugees, and things could get only worse because nobody likes to hear stories about global policemen. Now, but do you want to live in the neighborhood without the police?
Well, we could have a good discussion about that, but we won't this morning.
I would like Syrians or other people just to participate in this discussion.
Yeah, sure, I understand. But I think your assumption that we have the capacity, the United States, to fix things up in these countries or in that region, I would dispute.
Yeah, but it's fixing doesn't mean that you have to get there. It's not about a full Monty assault. So I think it's a mistake to think that you have choices between George W. Aggressive approach and Obama's appeasement policies. Between war and appeasement, there is a vast territory called leadership, and I believe that there's many things can be done if you are in the position to make a credible threat. And Ronald Reagan hadn't used much of force, but he achieved certain results. So it's about restoring the credibility of the office. Of the Oval Office, and I think that is the last two presidencies contributed dramatically to the destruction of this credibility because if you send troops all over the place, it's not a sign of strength, and if you take them back without any conditions and declare that you want to sort of disengage from most explosive regions in the world, that's also a sign of weakness.
Your goal, as you write in the book, is the democratization of authoritarian regimes, among other things. I'm not sure how we do that. I wanted you to talk for a minute about China, which you mentioned. If our goal, starting tomorrow, was to democratize China, how would we do that?
Did I say China in the book?
No, I said China.
Yeah, so this I'm not an expert in China, and I think it will be quite foolish to think that you can inspire the changes in China by some very aggressive proactive policy. I mean, China is China. It's much more powerful than Russia in every term today. But speaking about Russia, which I know a bit better than China, so the book actually argues not for providing any support for Russian opposition. The book argues that America's foreign policy, accompanied by the European powers, was to provide support for Putin's regime at the very beginning. It was very difficult for people like me or Boris Nemtsov to talk to this very limited Russian audience that we could reach. in, say, 2006, 2007, and to tell them about the true nature of Putin's regime, when even for those who liked us and wanted to believe us, they had Channel 1, Channel 2, Channel 3 showing Putin hosting G8 summit, having Bush, Blair, Berlusconi, Merkel already, I think, at that time, Chirac, Harper. So who to believe? Putin knew how to build his reputation as the democratically elected leader in Russia. And what's happened over first 8 years of his rule, I don't use the word presidency because, even when technically somebody else was there, he was still in charge. And even today, we hear voices saying that we'd better deal with Putin because Putin is the best we can get in Russia. So Putin knew and he knows how to play this game of political poker, how to sort of use even his weak hand, but to bluff, to raise the stakes, and to get concessions he needs. Today, he doesn't need friends as 10 years ago. He needs enemies, and he does it extremely well by sort of creating an image of an invincible leader who can defy free world, especially the United States. So I have to say that some of his PR coups staged. One of them actually was here in New York in September. They were masterpieces. When he just arrived here for United Nations General Assembly, he was here officially to deliver a speech. The Wall Street Journal asked me to write an editorial. I said I could do it in advance because I knew that the whole trip was not about the speech, but about meeting Obama. And it's actually not to discuss anything, but actually to make a picture. And you probably remember the picture, that Putin's reluctant handshake with Obama. I bet you he spent a few hours in front of the mirror actually practicing this because he knows the power of the image. This is the image that goes back to Russia, and everybody could see Putin just reluctantly shaking Obama's hand because he had no choice but to go to New York, the belly of the beast, to the General Assembly of the United Nations, meet U.S. President, and the next day, Russian planes bombed American-backed opposition in Syria. My mother, she still lives in Moscow. She's 78. She was born and raised under Stalin. She heard, all sorts of Soviet propaganda, from Stalin to Khrushchev, Brezhnev, Gorbachev, and now, she keeps telling me that the difference between Putin's propaganda machine and what she heard when she was younger is that Soviet propaganda contains some elements of the positive future. It was still an idea that one day, with all the sacrifices, we could reach our shining house on the hill, the communism, brotherhood. Putin's propaganda has no positive images. It's like a cult of death. It's all about conflict. It's about confrontation. So it's very dark. And that's the way Putin rules the country, because with further economic decline in Russia, with the deterioration of the socioeconomic conditions, you could hear more and more aggressive propaganda on 24/7 basis. And again, it's not a sign of strength, but unfortunately, it's being desperate. He could do desperate things, and if oil goes down to 20, I'm not sure that NATO borders will stop him.
You were born in Baku, Azerbaijan.
Yes.
That is the Houston, Texas of Russia. You must fully realize how weak an economic hand Putin is holding. It is a petrostate. There are very few exports to the rest of the world from Russia, except for natural gas, which they hold as a sort of Damocles over Europe, and oil. The other factor, I think, limiting his hand is the advent of cyber warfare. We could take down the Soviet electric grid with the flip of a few switches if he invaded the Baltics, for example. How powerful do you think those two factors are in limiting his both international and domestic strength?
Thank you for reminding me about my birthplace. Yes, in America, I often say that, I was born and raised in the Deep South right next to Georgia, which is factually correct. Azerbaijan is born in the Republic of Georgia, and it was the Deep South of the USSR. Now, you're absolutely right, just describing the the economic situation in Russia. So, and when you look at all the numbers that at Putin's 16 years rule, you'll find out that it became much worse. So in year 2000, the share of oil and gas and refinery products in Russian export was 40%. Today, 70%. When you look at at the Russian roads, for instance, so we're building in 2014, 2015 4 times less than in year 2000. So all this money that have been accumulated, we're talking about probably trillions of dollars. They were not invested in rebuilding Russian infrastructure, but rather making a new class of billionaires. Now, speaking about the economic weakness, again, being right on explaining the situation in Russia, I'm not sure that you are reaching the right conclusion, because yes, Putin is weak, and he knows that there is no way he can improve the situation. But he also has burned all the bridges. There's no way for him to retire. It's like a golden cage. So the only response could be, to start another war. So it says you're talking about America, being able to cause this huge damage. That's what I said. Absolutely. No, there's no doubt that the United States and European allies could do terrible damage to Russia. The problem is you haven't done it. You could stop Crimea. You could stop war in eastern Ukraine. You could do many things, but nothing happened. And Putin, the way Putin sees it, it's not about power, it's about will. He has a weak hand, yes. He has pair of 5. And Obama has full house. But it doesn't matter in poker. This is not chess. It's not a transparent game when you could see, what you have and what your opponent has. It's about your will. And I said, at the beginning of this Ukrainian crisis and annexation of Crimea, I said that this is the Europeans. They were looking for any excuse not to be aggressive and by defending the borders, which is again it's a pillar of European and global security since 1945, because they have very different view of potential damages. So if you cut your finger or you do harakiri, there is blood in both cases with different outcome. But it seems to me that Putin is betting on lack of political will. And that's what I'm trying to encourage. So this is, I want to see, for instance, bipartisan debate here in this country, to talk about comprehensive policy, to send a message, because sometimes with the message you can reach more than with sending troops. The problem is that with demonstrating weakness, with policy of appeasement, at every new cycle of the crisis, you will have to employ stronger measures. So, and my fear is that Putin may misread these messages, and if he feels desperate, as I said, and check with Estonians or Latvians, he can decide that he can start a hybrid war in Narva or elsewhere.
If the Russian army marched into Ukraine today, would you recommend that the U.S. go to war?
I never recommended the United States to use force, to use boots on the ground in Ukraine. What I said, and I'm saying now, is that Ukraine was a very important test for the resolve of the free world to defend the existing world order. Unlike Estonia, Latvia, or Poland, Ukraine is not a member of NATO. So that's why the United States has no direct obligations to send troops to defend this country. But it's about the credibility of the office. And I believe from the very beginning the United States could offer more help to Ukraine. And I think it's a shame that this administration, actually it's not administration, it's one person, the President of the United States, who acted against the advice of the Congress, bipartisan support, against the advice of State Department, and against the advice of his own vice president. And I'm not even mentioning Pentagon. So to provide Ukraine with lethal weapons. And I saw the list of these weapons that are required by Ukrainians. It's a very small list. One US base, could actually provide it without even noticing, It would be more of a psychological move to send message to Putin and to Russian generals. Because at the end of the day, it's the Cold War mentality, which unfortunately we're living through now. It was about, your psychological readiness to stand your ground and to demonstrate the resolve, and showing weakness in Crimea and in eastern Ukraine. So I believe that West is provoking Putin for further actions. If Putin moves, into Ukraine, of course, more help will be needed, but Ukrainian army is pretty strong enough to inflict the damage beyond repair for Putin. And he knows. The reason he stopped in eastern Ukraine, not because he turned to be a dove, out of hawk. He just calculated the damages. And he knew that, it would be devastating for him to see thousands of body bags coming from Ukraine to Russia. He expected that ethnic Russians in Ukraine would be embracing Russian tanks and Russian soldiers. Contrary to his expectations, overall majority of ethnic Russians in Ukraine signed for Ukrainian army, not for invading force. What actually we saw in eastern Ukraine is more like Russian civil war. Most of people fighting on the Ukrainian side were ethnic Russians, because they knew what Putin Russia was, and they didn't want to live in this country. So it was a conscious choice of Ukrainians and Russians living in Ukraine to stick with Europe and not to go back to the Putin's golden horde.
Well, I want to thank you both for a 21st century discussion on 20th century history.
For more on this program and other Carnegie Ethics Studio productions, visit carnegiecouncil.org. There you can find video highlights, transcripts, audio recordings, and other multimedia resources on global ethics. This program is made possible by the Carnegie Ethics Studio and viewers like you.